And we're recording. All right, so for anyone who has been part of episodes 1 and 2, welcome back to the Talking Average Fitness podcast. As always, my name is Sam Burns. I'm joined by my Ginger Ninja compatriot, Mr. Kevin McCarthy, and our first guest speaker slash interviewee, Mr. Pat Barber. Pat, thank you for being here. We appreciate it.
Stoked to be here, man. I'm really excited to chat, to throw some opinions out there. It sounds like a fun adventure.
Yes, we were just talking about how opinions are maybe all we have armed ourselves with. Um, so to catch anyone up who might have forgotten from last week or didn't catch last week's episode, we were talking about the state of CrossFit last week. We kind of settled at the end of that episode on a question, and that question was: are we as trainers or coaches, are we having people do what they are doing inside of their affiliate or their box in order to get them fitter, or are we having them do what they do in order to get them better at CrossFit? And obviously, Kevin and I feel like those are two separate things, and some people might have some other opinions about, are those necessarily separate things or not?
Yeah.
Before we go down that rabbit hole, I do want to kind of touch base on, Pat, your bona fides in terms of like why anyone should listen to you. So, like, 20-second Tabata version, like,
Yeah.
kind of how and when did you find CrossFit, and what has that looked like to bring you to where you are now?
Yeah. Do I get the full 8 rounds with 10
Yeah,
seconds off?
yeah,
Or to
yeah.
just
100%.
Yeah, bottom to bottom, ready to go.
Yeah.
I'm talking the whole time, man. The 10 seconds are even harder. So fair. 20-second version. I started in this as a 18-year-old kid who enjoyed competition. So I found CrossFit randomly through old teachers. And they brought it and tried to get us to do it so we could get better at volleyball. And they ended up being some of the pillars of CrossFit. Tony Budding, who was the original media director of CrossFit, and Nicole Carroll, who's the current director of training for CrossFit, were my two teachers who brought it to us. And they were around since the beginning, and they brought it to me, and I've been around since then. I've gone every evolution in the space from filming and editing video for the company, to coaching at local affiliates, to coaching for seminar staff, which I still do, teach level 1s and level 2s, to competing in the games, to competing on teams, to competing individually, to running multiple gyms, to owning a company that does affiliate programming, to doing digital stuff, to working for equipment companies. And I've just kind of been in the space for a very, very long time. I think long enough to come full circle on a lot of thought processes, and made plenty of mistakes, and learned from those, and hopefully continue to help people avoid certain pitfalls that I fell into, that I've watched others fall into. And now at a place where it's part of my life, but not all of my life, which is an interesting thing, because I think when we get really heavily involved in anything, we can let it consume us to a point where we miss the forest for the trees at times, and we get so consumed by it that we can't see anything of value outside it. So while it is how I earn all my revenue, it's where I've met my wife, it's where I've done everything, it is only one component of a much larger, fuller life now. So it just takes time for that to be the case, and I'm happy where I am.
Yeah, and I love the sentiment that you're expressing. And so as as someone who, I think, how old are you, Pat?
I'm 36.
You're 36. I'm the oldest guy here.
Woo, good for you.
Yeah. So like as a guy who, also has a son and came into CrossFit, didn't discover CrossFit until my 30s, like it almost by necessity, like I've had to work it into my existing life and make it part of my life rather than having it be my whole life. So I identify very strongly with that sentiment. It's very, very cool to hear. So kind of like taking myself out of the microphone spot as quickly as possible. Kevin, you brought up some really, really good points last week when we were talking about this whole thing. And if you've got a guy like Pat in front of you who really has been around for almost the entirety of CrossFit as we know it, and has done a lot of those things, thinking about this topic, like, what's the first question that comes to mind for you that you want to like get out there, and like what's the thing that's burning inside of you?
I mean, I think the biggest question, coming back to the question we ended on last episode, where is what we're doing in the affiliate serving getting fitter or serving getting better at kind of quote unquote CrossFit or the sport of CrossFit,
I
is
think
when
you
it
just
comes
touched
to,
on the difference.
yeah, that
What
is
you
the
just said,
difference there.
by definition, is the difference. Like you said it, and then you followed up with the sport of CrossFit, because
Yeah,
those are two different goals,
yeah, yeah.
and we can talk about the difference in a second. But yeah, that's you hit the nail on the head like right out the gate, and I'm really excited to dig into it. But yeah, keep going.
Yeah, I think that is the question that people kind of maybe have in their heads, or maybe don't even know that it is a relevant question. They just think that CrossFit is CrossFit and, it's same, same. So what would you say if you had to like put a definition, like what would be the difference between CrossFit for fitness versus CrossFit as a sport? Just because I think that is something that people might think, especially if they're coming into CrossFit now, where they don't know anything of where CrossFit started. They just see that it's this grand spectacle at the games and all these athletes doing ridiculous things, and that's
Yeah,
what CrossFit is.
yeah,
How would you
yeah.
kind of differentiate those two things, like kind of diverge those paths for those people?
Yeah. So I think the easiest way to very succinctly say the difference in the two is that CrossFit as a program and methodology is the pursuit of fitness, and fitness and health, the two combined. Health being fitness across a lifetime, and I think CrossFit, the sport, is the pursuit of fitness and dominance for the time being in the absence of health.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the definition we have of health that is given at the level one is fitness across your age. Fitness being a very specific definition of work capacity across broad time modal domains across your lifetime. And I think that in order to be dominant now, people sacrifice longevity
Mm-hmm.
via volume of training, and that's the main difference. Is they're looking to
Mm-hmm.
compact their fitness into a specific time for a specific event, which makes it the sport of fitness. So
Yep.
in an effort to do so, programming ends up not being the pursuit of health necessarily, but the pursuit of dominance in the moment. And I think that that's it's a subtle difference, but it's a big difference when it
Yep.
plays out on the daily for individuals who walk into a gym.
Yeah.
And that's like the most succinct way I can kind of put that. But to dig a bit deeper, it's like I think almost exactly what you're saying is people right now programming in an affiliate often program in a way to pursue CrossFit. They're like, let me just do CrossFit as I understand it,
Mm-hmm.
rather than pursuing it with a broader spectrum of like, I want to program in such a way to pursue fitness, because fitness shouldn't be different than doing CrossFit, but can be different if your end states are, if you're not, we don't do CrossFit for CrossFit's sake. We do CrossFit for fitness's sake, but you,
Right.
but you can do CrossFit for CrossFit's sake, which ends up being the sport of CrossFit. So
Yeah.
it's, that's the main things that I see going, I would actually say wrong in affiliates these days
Mm-hmm.
is this pursuit, this blind pursuit of CrossFit for CrossFit's sake, rather than doing CrossFit for fitness's sake.
I think that was very well said. That was very, very well said there. Gave really good definition of, when you, I think that is the big difference there, is the absence or inclusion of health as part of the goal.
Right.
If you're pursuing CrossFit as a sport, you're pursuing functional dominance. If you're pursuing CrossFit for health, you're pursuing functional competence, and there's very different levels to that and how you approach that.
Yeah.
If you're, again, to phrase it differently, if you're training CrossFit as a sport, you're training for the test. It's going to get tested. The loads and the domains, everything's going to get tested. You train for the test, and it's very specific. Whereas life is a very broad spectrum of things that can happen. So you kind of have to train for that. And I think that's slight like nuance to that, and that's a whole conversation. But
Well,
that's why
I
we're
think
here.
a good thing to point out is like, what's the difference of the test of the CrossFit Games versus the test of life? And the
Mm-hmm.
main thing is the focused volume. So like
Mm-hmm.
when you look at the test of fitness, it's like those athletes need to handle an extreme amount of volume in a single day to 5 days, like, and if you look at the tasks of life, you will never have to face that kind of volume. Like that's never going to be the case.
Yeah.
So
if you do, you're in trouble.
you're in,
if you do, you're in so much trouble.
If you're facing that volume across the spectrum of modalities that they do at the games, like there's just like shit has hit the fan many a time. I like even post-apocalyptic, like we're not seeing that type of loading, that type of volume, that type of focus, that type of intensity. Like I don't care what scenario happens, you can't organically require a human being to do that kind of volume. It's literally a test.
Right.
Like that's what it is. And volume is the biggest component that's different than the just fitness for life. Because you could make the argument that the CrossFit athletes at the CrossFit Games will be the most competent at life because they're so dominant. And in the moment right now, absolutely, I would 100% agree. But I would say that you give them 40, 50 years, they're going to be dealing with things, even 20 years, they're going to be dealing with things that they wouldn't have otherwise had to deal with because of the sacrifices they're making now. And even those athletes, most ex-athletes wouldn't tell you like, hey, what we're doing right now is a great idea for my long-term knee health, back health, joint health, and that's just the nature of the game. Like and we make those sacrifices intentionally. But where I see the mistake is that when someone extrapolates that and looks at the requirements for the games and they make it for the athlete at home and they're like, yep, you need to handle volume. And it's like, no, you don't. and because volume, while being an amazing thing, like if you can handle volume, that's great, is something that is the easiest way to burn someone out, is to just give them too much too soon. It's like the only way to burn someone out, really, is too much too soon or just like an acute accident. Like those are the two things that can happen. And the too much too soon is the one that happens like so often.
Yeah. And I think when it comes to from like that, the longevity of the athlete perspective, I mean, it's starting to not be a secret. I mean, we've seen that like all these high level games athletes, I won't say former because they're all still incredibly fit, but they're no longer competing individually at the games. You've seen Dan Bailey's had multiple surgeries. Rich has had his knees done. Ben's had his knees done. Like Ben Smith, Josh Bridges had his knees and something else done. Yeah. So it's like all these athletes that for, the greater part of the last decade were at the top, the spear of the sport. And some of them are still going. Like Ben Smith is still throwing down and competing and doing a thing, but he definitely had to rehab his way back from a knee surgery to do so. And I think it's the difference there being that those athletes are consciously making that choice, making that sacrifice. They're like, yep, I know that doing this right now in this pursuit, like they understand the risk and they're going for it. But if an affiliate is programming in a way to try and force that on someone, the new member is not consciously making that choice, like, and knowing the risks of that. And I think that's a massive difference in, I mean, I'll just say, like, if you're programming in that way for your gym, like you're doing your members a disservice in my mind.
100%. And now to be clear, I do think that there is the potential, if you're very good at programming, there is a way to do a strength metcon kind of daily. It's really hard.
So hard. Yeah.
It's really subtle and really, really hard to deliver that in a way where there is there's constant check-ins necessary. I mean, there's always constant check-ins necessary with any type of high intensity training, but it's much more difficult to do that well. And you have to have like really high level coaches with amazing amounts of skill and empathy and know exactly what they're doing and being like, hey, you pull back, you go here. I think there's a lot more room for fluff, like for growth as a coach. Like you have to already be an experienced coach to be able to deliver a class like that well. Whereas I think you can be a less experienced coach and there's so much more room for error and growth when you're programming just a single focus day. So I think, is it possible to do it? I think it is. I have yet to see a gym that really, really does it, but I know I know it's possible, but it's
Yeah. Very, very rare, like
very
incredibly
rare.
hard to do, very hard to implement. And I think, you know, I think there's room for that. I mean, Sam and I had talked about this prior. Like, if you have a workout, and we used last week in the podcast, we used the example of Fran as the class workout. I think if you have a workout like that, because the workout is shorter time domain, you can, you know, throw some sort of a lift or strength in there. In my mind, I think like it relates to, you're probably going to build up to a heavy 3-rep thruster or something like that beforehand. You're not doing like a 5x5 back squat at 90%. But I think like those days, those days should be kind of like not the norm. Again, that's just my opinion that like if you're going to do a 1 or 2 times a week, do like a lift and a shorter workout and that's it. But if, again, to your point, if you're going to try and program a lift plus Metcon every day of the week that you run class, number one, you better have the most dialed in programming and coaches and timeline ever. And number two, you are missing out on that longer window workout time domain that we do need to cultivate fitness. Like you can't do a 20 or 25 minute workout in that model. Like your workouts are kind of stuck at 15 minutes or less.
Totally. And the hard part, I think, these days is that there's a certain physiological response that is very deeply coupled with a psychological response to doing a strength Metcon. So people who are members get accustomed to this feeling of like, go heavy, do this, go heavy, do this, go heavy, do this. And if they don't sweat hard in a day or they don't go heavy in a day, they get like irrationally angry. And like you've essentially conditioned them to do that. Like these are literally rats in a cage that you gave sugar every day, and then you withheld the sugar from them and asked them to not get angry. And the idea is like they're having this physiological response. They're actually craving this release of
Pavlovian response.
Yeah, it's like a release of dopamine from a high intensity workout and a systemic response from the strength that they've been getting every day. And when they don't get it, they're mad at you. And you're like, but I'm here to help you. So like if you build this strength Metcon into a facility, it is so hard to remove. It's like it's painful because people don't know why they know what they know, and they know it, tangibly in the sense, hey, this is different. But they also what they don't know is that they've actually been conditioned to like love that. And as soon as they don't get it, like, this makes me mad. So it's really hard to change. So I feel for gyms that have to change. It's not easy, man.
I went down that road. The gym that I started at, we like strength and Metcon was the move. And again, I had just got my level 1. I didn't really know any better. I was 2 days into my coaching journey. I was like, sure, I guess this is what it is. And then, once myself and the owner of the gym got our level 2s and we're like, okay, we need to adjust this. That adjustment was super hard. And I think the thing that makes it really hard is the fact that it works. Even, I mean,
for sure,
CrossFit's such a potent stimulant that even when implemented poorly, it's effective. Like you could be doing the worst job programming and, implementing CrossFit methodology, and it's still going to deliver results. Like that's how effective this is. And so as a member coming to the gym, you're like, well, I've been doing my back squat and Helen every day for the past 2 years. I've been getting better. What gives, man? Why are we changing it? And it was a super hard transition. I'm sure, I don't know if you guys have both been down that road, but changing that was incredibly hard in the sense that, we announced to the members, hey guys, we're going to make this change to our programming. And, the reasons why is because like, 1, it's going to help you guys get better results. And 2, it's going to help us as the coaches better serve you as our members and our athletes. Like we're going to have more time, more ability to coach you guys during class. And we have a handful of members that leave. And I know that's an intimidating thing for gyms. If I change this, what's going to happen to my membership base? We had a handful of members leave the gym, but of the 10 that left, 30 more joined. So it was all good. But the thing that we noticed was people were still PRing things. I had someone ask a question like, how come we got rid of the strength and stuff? I'm like, well, it allows us to better do this, this, and this. It's like, but just yesterday, didn't you just PR your back squat? She's like, yeah, I did. I'm like, weird, huh? Like it's you're not doing the strength stuff, but you still PR'd your back squat and you PR'd Helen the other day. And you know, and the thing is, everybody else, you start to see those nagging sort of like little injuries and tweaks start to fade to the background, where it's like no one's got like, I tweaked my back, or like my hips are super tight, or my knees are bugging me again. Everyone's started to become a lot healthier physically because they weren't having to. I mean, let's be honest, if you do 2 training pieces a day, you've just statistically doubled your risk for injury. And most people aren't doing the recovery stuff outside of the gym. They get home, they've got kids soccer practice, and then got to handle the dog threw up on the carpet and all the fun life stuff that people deal with. And they're probably not spending 30 to 60 minutes like foam rolling and stretching and working mobility stuff to recover for the next day, to handle that increase in volume.
Yeah, because they're not competitive CrossFitters. Right. They have more than just that. They have their hour in the gym. Yeah, but it's like, easy to conflate. Like, I need to do more in this hour. You know, like we're so much in a culture of let's do more, let's do more, let's do more. More is better. It's like, nah, man. Like, not for health, not for longevity, not for like increasing everything across the board. Mm-hmm. And like it's I don't know. I see it all the time. Like it's heartbreaking, but at the same time, I understand how we got here. I mean, like for me, I mean, you guys are, have been described to me as CrossFit nerds, in the sense like you really geek out on the nuance of it. And
accurate.
That's a compliment. I'll take that.
Yeah.
And I think that that's fantastic. I think that's necessary. But what I think is a lot of people have a very cursory understanding of what's going on, and it's more about emotion and feeling, and this is what I've experienced and blah blah blah, and like that's what we tried to get away from. We are like a data driven community. Like that's what we were going for. And when you look at a bigger picture, like long term, like this works. Like the doing one workout a day, working on things to become more well-rounded, letting people recover, like that's what we're going for. And I think the waters were muddled when I've said this before in other places, and I don't know if you guys have heard me say it, but like, I feel like we played a game of telephone with programming. Mm-hmm. So essentially what happened was the original CrossFit programming came from CrossFit.com. It was the only place you could ever get programming. So everyone who came to the original seminars, the only CrossFit they'd ever done was CrossFit.com, you know? And so when they came, they had a sense and a feel for what CrossFit was, and then they went off. And they maybe someone felt confident enough to do their own programming after Greg gave them a lecture. And they go, okay, well, I'm going to do my own programming, but I'm going to insert my own little bias here because I'm me. Like not intentionally. You're just you. You do it a little differently because you're you. Now, someone comes to their gym and has never gone and done CrossFit.com specifically. They go to their gym. They start to fall in love with their experience of CrossFit, which is a slightly affected version. And then they come to a 2-day seminar, they hear it from the horse's mouth, and they go off and they do their own program, which is mostly their experience they had at their gym, a 2-day seminar with one lecture on programming, and then their own affected version of that. And you have this thing that just keeps tweaking over and over again as it expands out to more and more gyms, like a person who's opened an affiliate, who opened an affiliate, who opened an affiliate, who opened an affiliate, like who like all the way down to where like what's being said down here is very different than what we originally started with. And I used to get mad until like I came to that realization and took a step back and was like, we just played a game of telephone. And it's like, it's not a wonder at all that like one lecture at a 2-day seminar after like drinking from a fire hose the whole weekend, that they didn't like nail the one workout a day sort of deal after being, going to whatever affiliate they were at for a full 2 years before they did their level 1 and doing a strength metcon every day. We didn't knock it out of their system with one lecture. Shucks, So we're here for a reason, but that doesn't mean we can't all be like, okay, let's step back for a second and look at the reckoning that has come and do it better. Anyway.
I love that sentiment, and I agree entirely with the logic follows. Yes, there was what was said, and then there was the experience of what was said, and there was the experience of the experience, and so on and so forth. And it, like, I get that,
Yeah.
I think the problem with, and I've got so many notes on so many fantastic things that were said by both of you so far. Like, I think part of what you touched on it earlier was like, there's this emotional component where,
Cool.
and it's not
Hmm.
just for the athletes, it's for the coaches, it's for the programmers, it's now for entire brands
Yep.
where, like, as a, from wherever you were in the chain of events in that line of telephone, like you have your conception of CrossFit, and now like that's part of your identity.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. I think it's possible to put the brakes on and step back, but one of the hardest things to do is to change how a human being thinks. And just
Yep.
getting people to step back from their own emotional connection, just be like, okay, wait. Like objectively, what the heck am I trying to do here? And am
Right.
I actually accomplishing that? You
Yeah.
know, that's
Hmm.
that's a
And
really
the hard part
good.
is you can like objectively go, look at all my members' numbers. They're going well. You know,
Yes.
Yeah.
when you do those kinds of things, like they're doing great and they're blah blah blah, but what they don't see is the long term game that's
Yeah.
being played. And it's like you have to be in it long term to watch that game fail.
Yes.
Like those 10 members that you lost probably
Yep.
were going to get lost anyway. Like they were
Yep.
probably going to eventually burn out and just disappear or do their own little thing in the corner. Like those are
Yep.
the members who when you change things, they don't trust you enough. They
Yep.
trusted what they were doing, which is not the person you want. You want the
Right.
member who, when you change, they're like, I trust you wholeheartedly. Thank you for building that relationship. Let's do this, And maybe
Yep.
they have a question and they ask you and you clarify for them and you move on. But there's definitely there's I don't know, it's hard to, like, we can look back with 2020 hindsight, but it takes years in the game for that to be possible.
Yeah.
And it's like I'm nearly 20 years deep in this and I've watched all iterations and I see people coming up and making the mistakes and I'm curious as a coaching developer for years, I was like, how do we shorten the process for learning, right? How do we make it so people avoid, and I said at the beginning of this conversation, how do we make it so you can avoid pitfalls? And I don't even know if you can. Like, I don't even know if like you can actually avoid these things. I think people have to do them, screw it up,
Yeah. Yep.
watch it be screwed up,
Yeah.
and then I think what you can do is you can heighten people's awareness. You can be like, okay, be on the lookout for this. Like, pay attention to this, and then after the fact they'll go, dang it. But I think they still have to make mistakes.
Sure.
I think they still have to climb the tree and fall for them to understand what their limits were. You can't show them their threshold. You can't. I don't know. It comes back to parenting for me, where it's like,
Yeah.
do it for them and expect them to know.
Yep.
Yeah.
They have to live it.
Sure.
I don't know. It's I get wrapped up in this because I'm like, what's the most effective way for me to change coaches' minds? And I'm like, I don't know if I can.
Yeah.
I think they need to screw it up and then come to that realization on their own.
Well, I think you're kind of highlighting something that I don't hear talked about enough, which is like the life cycle, like the really big picture, right? Like, so going back to something that, Kevin and you were saying earlier, like talking about games level athletes, I heard Austin say once, at a professional level, everybody's in pain. And I think that's something that's really important to remember about the athletes who are doing this incredible test that is the CrossFit Games and what they are experiencing and what the cost of that experience is. Because if then we have programmers who are looking at that as the example, and then they're taking and they're programming for that, we're passing that cost on to consumers who are not doing professional level athlete sleep and nutrition and recovery and all of that other thing, And now, years into it, Tony Ronke said this recently. He said, when you get to a certain level, like say you accumulate your level 3, like from a knowledge standpoint, it's amazing that you can test and you've got all that knowledge, but really that's like graduating university and now you go off and you start your job.
Yeah.
And like now's the time to you've got all this accumulated knowledge, but in practice, I think you have to smash your face against a wall a couple times before you realize that, and I hate to put it like this, but and I'll only speak for myself, in my journey along the way, I have done things as a coach that have been a disservice to other people.
100%.
Because I was
Yep.
I was too eager or I was misguided or I didn't know what I didn't know,
Yep.
And now it's
We've all been there.
years, yeah, and now it's years later, and I can sit and I can have the appreciation. Like when I turned 20 and I realized my dad wasn't an idiot and he actually did know a bunch of stuff, and was trying to save me. Um, it didn't stop me from smashing my face against a wall, but I started to appreciate like what was being said a little bit more. And
Yeah.
I think you might be right. I don't know that there's a way that we can, with standards or with a seminar or with some kind of program, we can provide resources.
Yeah.
But I mean, my godsend in this particular case has been mentorship, has been
Yeah.
working closely for a prolonged period of time with other coaches who have been doing this longer than I have and have been able to do exactly what you're saying and say,
Yeah.
hey, watch out for this thing that you're doing. And then I would do it and screw up, and we come back and we have a debrief, and this person helps me understand on a deeper level, and I retain that information.
You were right. I
Yeah,
get it.
Yeah.
shocker.
Well, I wonder. I mean, I think right now there's more voices in the community than ever has been, reflecting deeply on like these exact subjects. So I wonder if, as a community, we continue to just to talk about it, and we get people who are a little bit more open minded, because there's plenty of people who are just shut off. But that they're like, nah, what I'm doing, this is what I'm doing. We're going here, and but I think there's more and more people who are realizing that they're oddly enough, they need to go back to their roots. Like it's not like a change in the forward facing. It's like going backwards and being like, whoa, let me pull it back. But I think as we continue to have these conversations, it's just the more people hear it, the more people are like, oh, I'm open to that idea. Because until you hear about an idea, you don't even know. Like, that's the thing, is like, until someone maybe like you either have to be really susceptible to change for that to be a thing, or you have to hear someone you really trust speaking about it in a way that is polar opposite to what you believe. And I think that that's what's interesting, is we often pay attention to people who directly support what we believe. So like so you tend to respect the people who believe the same things as you. So if we can start to expose ourselves to people that we enjoy, like that we trust what they're saying, but maybe they have a differing way of doing it, it's great. Like, I mean, I called up, he's a total hater. What's his name?
Hiller.
He does
Andrew Hiller.
No, I like Andrew Hiller. I think he's funny as hell. Like I don't agree with what he does, but I love the fact that he exists within our community, and he's just doing what he does.
Yeah. I love that he does not care. He's like, this is the way I see it.
Yeah.
And that's it. You can do with it what you will. Like, if you hate me, cool. If you like me, cool as well. Like, but this is still what I think. I think that it's awesome. I also love that, like, it warmed my heart. Like, whenever he made a video, like, calling out people, Sam knows, calling out people like movement standard wise, like, that's not a squat, still not a squat, it's still not a squat. You like, like depth is hip crease below your knee. Like, it's, like.
What I find funny as hell though is that, like, you would never want to, I mean, very rarely is that the method you would go at for coaching an athlete, like
Right.
A member at your gym, if you're just walking up to him and saying, that's not a squat, you're an asshole, like, you're a straight up asshole. But the people who he's calling out are peak performers who should know better. Like they need to be told, not, hey, go a little deeper. They need to be told, nope. Like, still not there.
Because you're getting paid to do this. You're literally getting paid to put your hip crease below your knee. So you should be decent at doing that.
And what cracks me up is it's like, it's not even like subjective. Like, there's these people out there who are like trying to argue the point. I'm like, dude, it's not even close. What do you
man.
And then they'll like respond all emotionally, and I just crack up at the back and forth. So I'm like, dude, you couldn't be more in the wrong. Like, yes, Andrew Hiller went about it like an asshole, but you couldn't be more in the wrong. It's a fascinating little back and forth to watch.
It's because he called out their favorite athlete. They're like, I like this athlete. Like, I follow them on Instagram. I love all their stuff. I relate to them in some way, maybe. And then Andrew's like, they kind of move like shit, like they don't hit moves, and they're like, how dare you?
How dare
So
you?
it's just kind of, that's again, it's that emotional kind of response to it. You form an emotional connection with that athlete in some way, shape, or form. And as soon as it's like, well, maybe it's not that great, you're like offended by it.
I love it. But I think if you bring it down to coaching, like all the way back, like a coach needs to have the confidence that Andrew Hiller does, but needs to deliver it in a way that the person can hear it and can change. So like that essentially is what we want. We want somebody who, as a coach, is so confident that they're willing to be like, nah, you fucking move like shit. That's not it. Like we want that. Like, but you don't want to express it like that because most people can't hear that. You want to be able to express it like that to an athlete who needs that, but you want to be able to pull it back enough to where like you can hold grandma accountable to grandma's to the same standard. And it's not like you're being a good coach by holding them accountable, and you're being a great coach by saying it in a way that they can hear it. And I think that you really need to be like on top of refining how you deliver it. But at the very beginning of your career as a coach, you should be like, standards are important. I will not let standards go to the wayside. I will do everything in my power to make people hit standards, and then build all of methods on top of that. And I think what we've done is like almost reverse, is like people have been like, I'm gonna make people have a great time and blah 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 blah, like and be at the hype class and throw dance parties and stuff, but I'll do it at the expense, like, and then I'll develop my standards down the road. And it's like, like you gotta develop standards when you like right from the get, and they're not hard. That's the thing that blows my mind. Like, it's not hard. Like none of these things in terms of like, there are people who have physical limitations that prevent them from hitting standards, but most of those people, if you slow them down and adjust their stance and do a couple things, get very damn close.
Get closer,
they're
much
getting
closer.
And you're holding them accountable, and they love being held accountable as long as you're there with them and in care. But the whole standards thing is not hard. It's like the easiest thing to see. Like to make movements more technically efficient, that's hard. But like to make standards hit, it's like
it's not rocket surgery.
Go deeper. No. Like widen your stance. Okay, stand up a little bit. It's like it's so straightforward, but I don't know like how it gets missed in people's development.
Well, I mean, I'll speak to my own experience. I know exactly how I've seen it missed. And, talking about, being excited and dance parties and things like that, you made a joke. One of you made a joke earlier talking about strength in a Metcon and how, it's fine to do, a lift beforehand and then a short Metcon after. My experience in the last 2 years with strength and Metcon programming is that's not the case. They absolutely will shoehorn a 5x5 back squat on the front end of a 20-minute AMRAP. And so for coaches who are being brought up in this environment, they don't have the time to actually watch one human and say, slow down.
Right.
They've never had that practice. It's ready, go, and ready, go. Cool, give me 5 on your own, as if the previous ones weren't already on their own, And that's really hard. And, we talk about doing the athletes a disservice, in the way that some programming over-volumizes or over-prioritizes volume. But there's a whole other disservice being done to coaches, I think, as well, where we don't give them the time to actually coach. I mean, they're exercise instructors sometimes.
Well, I mean, oftentimes organic development should start, and this is how it started so Greg, the founder of CrossFit, he started with one-on-ones, filled his day out with one-on-ones, and once his day was full of one-on-ones, he couldn't take any more people. But more people wanted to train with him. So he was like, hey, you two, can you both come at 1:00 and you each pay half? And they're like, yeah, sure. So then he could fill his day with 2-on-1. So he could help more people. And then they got so full with 2-on-1s, he's like, well, can we bring 3 of you guys in? You each pay a third of the price. And then that's how the group class started for CrossFit. It wasn't like we were like, yeah, jazzercise, we want that. Let's do that. It was like, this stuff's too hard to do. As a group, let's do it one-on-one. But he organically grew out of that. And then people watched that and were like, okay, we can start small group classes. And it it made sense to have small group classes, but financially and things along those lines, it made sense. But just like you said, now coaches are being done a very big disservice where what they'll do is they'll go to a gym for years. They'll want to coach. They'll go to take their level 1, and then Monday they're in a 10-person class. They've never had the time to develop the basic one-on-one skills and the basic seeing and correcting. So yes, I do see how it has happened. Like we don't let people organically grow from 1-on-1 to 2-on-1 to 3-on-1 to 4-on-1 to, up to where they can handle more than that. Yeah. Unfortunately, that's just the nature of the beast at this point in time. So what I think needs to happen is anybody who gets the opportunity to start coaching classes also needs to start bringing people up one-on-one. So like there needs to be a conjoined, like they need to go, okay, if I'm going to coach classes, I also have to do on-ramps for people, or I also have to teach my mom how to squat, or I also it has to be in conjunction with it. So they're developing those personal skills. Cause like, if you've ever taught a one-on-one, like there's nowhere else to go. Like, nope. Like you're the opposite of being like, well, there's too much going on. It's like, you're still here in front of me, and I still have 59 minutes with you, and I feel like we're at the right place. So there's got to be such a deeper level of connection. It builds interpersonal skills. It builds seeing and correcting. You can hold people more accountable because you're there with them for longer. Like you can't just work them out the whole time. Like there's so much that is built through one-on-one sessions that just doesn't get built in the group class. So if you are getting thrown into classes, do yourself the favor and request to coach one-on-ones, request to coach on-ramp classes, request to get into these smaller groups if you can, if you actually want to develop. The other thing I would say is what the biggest thing I've seen, and I've mentioned this other places, but the biggest thing I've seen for the development of coaches is not so much courses that they take. It's not the education that they have. It's what they've seen done by other coaches and what they continually experience. So essentially a role model. So as a parent, most of what I say goes undone, but what I do, my kids mimic almost immediately, right? So it's so much, like it goes hand in hand, but it's so much about who you are and what you do that your kids will follow. And I found this to be the single greatest coaching development tool is if they have a coach in their space that represents a truly great coach, there will be far greater coaches that come from that space, even if they do no other coaching development, then have those coaches take that coach's class, because their experience of what a coach is will define for them how they need to be, which is and it almost happens automatically. And I've spent years trying to develop and push methodology into people and sit with them one-on-one. And those are all fine and dandy, but until you see what's possible all the time and you're trying to emulate that, that's the best thing you can do. So I think a lot of coaches don't have a coach in their facility that is truly great. And that's what we did really well when I ran NorCal CrossFit is we had some really great coaches. And then what I would do is I would take that great coach and make them the leader of a facility. So they would be coaching the majority of classes. Then anyone who came up in that system would be emulating that coach. They would have a little bit of their flaws, a little bit of their greatness, and then you could modify from there. Whereas I think a lot of gyms, they just don't have a great coach. They don't have coaches who are in either, can command the class really well, or are really strict with faults, or, have a good ability to communicate and make people, like you were saying earlier, when they say, all right, down, all right, up, all right, blah, blah, blah. They don't have coaches who say, all right, down, and then adjust everyone's stances and hold them in that position, then drive your knees out and lift your chest up, and then, okay, now up. Because that's a big difference than just calling the rep, is making those little touches happen in a static place. And so when that's never emulated for them, it's very unlikely that they'll just organically develop that unless they're just a ninja somehow. And that's a much slower process. So the biggest shortening of ability that I've seen is seeing someone who's truly great and attempting to continually emulate that. So yeah, that's what I want for every facility. I want someone in that facility to be the person who's, work their ass off to become truly great. And then other coaches have to be great. Otherwise they're going to look pathetic next to this other coach. And I hope they have the self-awareness to see that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's,
it's that principle of the rising tide raises all ships.
Yeah.
Yes.
You have someone at the front that they set the standard. It's right, this is now the standard. You have to get here. And so that journey can look different and take different amounts of time for different people. But if you set the standard as here, it's well, then now your coaches need to be here. This is the expectation.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I
it's
think
also
that's,
really fascinating to watch in our community. Once there was more gyms and coaches started moving from gym to gym. So like they would like a coach would come to town and be like, "Hey, can I coach at your facility?" It's been like it's few and far between that coaches integrate super well because
yeah.
there's unless they're like they themselves are a very humble person who's willing to modify what they're doing. If they're coming in as like a pre-existing set of conditions and then they're trying to like move into a facility, you often see these weird little hangups in them. Like we were developing coaches and we would get 3 or 4 applications a week to come coach at our gym and we needed more coaches. So we'd bring really experienced coaches in and it was almost easier to start with people who were clean slates and develop the coaching skills than it was to take someone, I've been coaching for 5 years. And then you watch them coach and you're like, oh shit. Like,
Yeah. Then you got to try and unlearn all those habits and mannerisms and
totally.
yep.
And unless they came in, like that was the thing I looked for when they came in is they came in humble of like, I'm totally willing to learn. I'm really excited to be here. And when you give them feedback, you can see them implement the feedback on the next one. Like just like any good sports team, like you want coachable people. I don't look for coachable members because I think that that's silly to do. I think members are all coachable if you figure out how to relate to them. But I think coachable coaches, you have to have. Like you can't have a stubborn asshole coach. Like the second you run into one of those, you're like I want a coach who will voice their opinion and fight with me, but then sit with it for a little bit and be like, okay, I see where you're here and here, and I disagree with you here, and then we move on. You know?
Yep.
Coachable coaches those are the hard ones to find, and those are the ones that you want to find.
Yeah.
Try to be those. If anyone out there is listening, be coachable. Like you have to be coachable, man. Like even these days, like every time I go to a gym and I work with other people, like right now I'm in a bit of a position of positional authority to where like I generally step into a space with some authority. But I mean, I love going to other places and having someone have no idea who I am and offer me feedback on it because it's like it gives you the ability to see how you're really being perceived. So even if you think you're awesome, chances are you're not being perceived fully the way you think you are.
Right. What an interesting concept. And Kevin and I have talked previously about, our upbringing as trainers was not the normal upbringing, and who we had as examples and like who helped set our standards.
Yeah.
And I am the guy you just described. Hopefully not the asshole version, but like I'm the guy who like I lived my entire coaching career in one part of the country and then I moved north to a different state and went into a totally different environment and I'm the odd man out. And so like now I've got to take all of my experiences and all of my learning and all that stuff and I've got to make it work for this environment.
Yeah.
Because if I can't connect with the people and if I can't connect with the other coaches, nothing gets better, right? And certainly not me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, so we did have, there is the capacity for someone to come in who's great and who you as an owner need to change. Like that is 100% a reality. Like I got that shown to me by a Finnish dude named Artu. He came in to our facilities that were already running really good. And he just opened my eyes to a whole new level of what was possible. And so we had to change, processes and things because he came in so great. He came in humble. He came in just right with everyone, like same process, didn't say he was great, did his whole thing. And you would watch him and you would see how effective he was. And I was like, I had my mind blown by how different he was than everything that I had tried to do, but how effective he was. And I had to immediately be like, shit, we got to change. Like, we don't have to change, but we need to look at this and be like, okay, there's stuff here that there's parts of it we need to really modify and make better. So I think you can absolutely have someone walk into your space who does actually know better. But they generally don't. Someone who does generally doesn't come in going, I know better, let's do it my way. They generally come in, I'm sure you did, Sam, humble and like, okay, how can I make this work? How can I make this and maybe have conversations that are a little tougher and be like, why are we doing this? But it's not like, hey, you're an idiot, we need to change. Like you do it from a respectful place. And that just absolutely could have people come in and know more than you currently know. Yeah. But it also sounds like you were coachable. Like even in what you were just saying there is you were like, how can I make what I do fit what's here? And what about here should I take on board that'll make what I'm currently doing better? And like that's the mindset you should have. So it doesn't sound like you came in as the asshole at all. Saying,
Well, I really try not to. Of course, like most humans, I'm my own worst critic. I
well, I know plenty of humans who are narcissistic as hell. They might say they're their own worst critic on Instagram, but they are clearly not their own worst critic. But
well, I'd love to think that that was the case, and it's my goal to try to do exactly that. And again, I'm less than 6 months in this affiliate, and so still feeling out the relationships and all that stuff, and it's definitely a process, and having, again, back to mentors, I had people who modeled that and who went from one facility to another as a known entity, and they had to grow and adapt and change, and then also try to retain something of themselves, and all with the purpose of, at the end of the day, we're trying to keep people healthy. We're trying to make them, if we're trying to chase fitness, we're trying to make them more fit or more capable across as many years as possible.
Yeah. It's a noble cause.
I think so.
Like, if nothing else, it's a noble cause, and I think that what breaks my heart is when people lose sight of the cause that we're going for. We don't often argue about it, but I think this pursuit of CrossFit for CrossFit's sake is something that is kind of skewed conversations and programming a lot. And I think that the actual cause of like, hey, what we're doing is trying to make people be able to do, if we look at the definition of fitness, live however, work at whatever capacity that they want. So whatever level they want for however long they want at whatever activity they want. So work capacity, broad time, modal domains. Can they do what they want, however long they want for at whatever level they want? And like, that's it. And as long as our programming is looking to support that throughout the entirety of their life, like we're doing a good job. But I think too often we argue about the nuance of CrossFit, and it's like, well, no, CrossFit means this to me. And it's like, well, sure, man. But like, is that supporting our larger definition of getting to do what they want at whatever level that they want for however long they want? And I think that's where our arguments need to shift. Our discussions need to shift. Like, what are we actually trying to do? And I don't think many people question that super often for their own sake.
Yeah.
Well, I just think that conversation can, sometimes be interesting or confusing because it's so easy. We've all found this thing, CrossFit, that we all love so much. It's so easy to get, lost in the sauce of I love this thing, CrossFit, I want to do it more. What does that look like? And, it kind of gets sucked into that to where, as soon as you get sucked in, it is hard to, as we've been saying, like take that step back, look at the bigger picture, what is the actual reason we're doing this for, as opposed to let's just do more and more and more because we enjoy it, So I think that's those goals and the motives behind why we do CrossFit can get lost as soon as you yourself kind of get lost in it and enjoying it so much. So I think a layer to that.
Another thing to look at is like people who are doing more and more and more, in my mind, is actually still better than people who do nothing, So it's like, yeah, it's not what I would do. And it's not a recipe for longevity, and it's going to probably lead to burnout for that person. But like, it's still way better than them just not being a part of what we do. It gives them some sense of like doing stuff. And it's like that, I mean, we argue about the nuance of it, but it's like, it's still awesome that they're out there doing really hard shit, like arguably way harder than they have to be doing, and way too much of it. It's such a fascinating problem to have of like, yeah, man, people just keep coming back to smash their head into the wall. I don't even get it. Wow. Like something is addictive enough in this process that they're willing to do that. Like, that's amazing. But it could be done better. And I think the recognizing that what's actually happening is awesome, but at the same time could be better is something that we should probably continue the discussion on a higher level with certain people with. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Fun, but exhausting, but meaningful.
Yeah. When
And I think that's the key, is like to keep having these discussions, keep talking about it, put it out there, be as much of a resource as we can, to the people in the space, and, just add our voice to that conversation so that, the ideas that we're talking about can continue to kind of grow and be heard by the people that hopefully need to hear them and are willing to listen.
Yeah.
when as you have said before, Pat, one of the you've tried to poke holes in this. This is
All
you
the
have
time.
not just spent the last 20 years towing a company line of some sort. Like,
Oh, no.
you have deliberately diverted
Oh yeah.
from the path and then found your way back, not just from like a coaching perspective, but from a training perspective as well. Yes?
Oh, yeah.
Really, really quickly, like when you divert, like what does that look like and what does it feel like? And then why did you come back?
So, I mean, for me, I have a bit of a unique story with this because I started so young, and it didn't it I it's like, I don't know, how would you say it? It's like I can't I went to relate it to a religious type thing, but I'm not a particularly religious person, so it didn't really resonate with me. But essentially, like for me, I knew nothing else. I just knew that CrossFit worked. I knew it was awesome. So as when you're first starting and you're young, like you think you know everything. Like you really do. I mean, and even if you're listening to this and you're young and you're like, no, there's some stuff I don't know, like you're still probably an asshole. And like and like like especially in my experience, young men between the ages of 20 and 30, like you're just like, oh, I freaking rule to some degree. You're like in some area of your life, like you think you know what's up. And my area was CrossFit, my area was fitness, and like I understood how to do all these movements on a deep internal level, and I got pretty decent at coaching. I was really bad at first, but I got better as years went on, and I got my physical accolades and all these things. So like CrossFit kind of gave me everything. And I have taught level 1 since 2006. So I've been very indoctrinated into this stuff. But like so for me, when I had my first child at 27, like when you have a child, it rocks your world in a way, if you let it, like nothing else. I mean, regardless of what you let, it's going to rock your world, but it can be for a positive overall outcome, or it can be completely send you off the rails and blah, blah, blah. For me, in the moment was really unsettling because I was no longer the center of the universe, right? And up till 27, I was 100% the center of the universe. Yeah, I love my wife, but I'm still the center of the universe.
But
And this kid just shifted my paradigm overnight. Like I'm not as important as I actually think I am. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think I'm not as special as I thought I was. Like I'm just a person. Like I'm just a normal person. So like realizing I was less important than I actually was allowed me to look at everything I was doing and be like, I don't need to be held on to this as tight as I thought I did. So then you could, sit back and take a deeper perspective. So, well, now what do I do? Like what if there's other stuff out there that's better? Like what if this information is not right? And like, how does that look? So it's continued education outside our space, and then pursuing things like, let's go strictly down strength. Let's go strictly down. Let's do a bunch of endurance work. Let's go into yoga and do yoga and why someone would do that. Let's go be a vegetarian and see why someone would be a vegetarian. What's this world about? And what's interesting is that like if you look at CrossFit as a methodology and how it was brought up, is like they ask you to examine it. Like like you're asked to be like, look closely at the data, see what's going on, make decisions based off of that. Like it's in that way, it's very scientific. Like that's what you're supposed to do. Like science is made to be questioned. So like if you're not questioning it, even if you believe in it, you're like, you should be questioning it, because that's what we're asking of you. And so for me, diverging just meant like traveling down paths for a few months at a time and being like, what's here? What can I bring back? What is this better? Like, is this going to be better for me long term? What's the physiological and psychological benefits of doing these types of things? And then after going down those paths and being like, why I see why I do what I do, it's coming back to doing CrossFit, but then digging into CrossFit and being like, okay, well, why this? Okay, well, why this? And then like looking to see if there's depth to the information. And then that's the thing that like, when you say poking holes, like I try to do that all the time. Like I try to go on this information and rip it apart and see like, okay, is this real? Like, is there something here that I'm like is behind this? And the shitty / good part is like every time you poke a hole through CrossFit, there's like another layer, and you're like, son of a bitch. Like this is like there's so much depth to it. Something that you looked at that was so surface level, and you're like, that's just there because they put it there. You poke a hole in it, and you're like, damn it. Like that's there for a very good reason. And I mean, there's a couple things that I could point to that I like. I go, okay, why is this here? Like I teach the level 1 still, and in the list of 10 general physical skills, that it's called the list of 10 general physical skills, and what it is a list of is physiological adaptations. So it's physical changes, right? Mm-hmm. But it's called the list of 10 general physical skills. Yeah. And then the next model is the Hopper model, but it's a balance of skills and drills. Mm-hmm. So it's the balance of skills and drills, and the one called the 10 general physical skills is not the balance of skills and drills. So like there's a naming issue, and I'm like, okay, well, why don't we just switch these names and it'll be clearer? I mean, it doesn't mean anything. Like it's just that was somebody else's list that we took. It was Jim Colley and Bruce Evans from Dynamics, and so now we're using their list, and it's called the list of physical skills, 10 general physical skills.
But 4 of which or 6 of which include neurological adaptations.
Right, which is funny in itself. And then you're like, well, it's a balance of physical changes, so physiological adaptations. So like you're like, okay, well, why don't we just call that the 10 general physiological adaptations that fitness should give you, you know? And then the next one can be the Hopper model or balance of skill and drills. You know, like it's like little stupid shit that like doesn't actually matter. And then there's other things like in that first list of skills, we mentioned strength, right? As being one of the physiological adaptations. But then we later redefined strength in the technique lecture, talking about strength as the productive application of force. So it's no longer referencing just the contractile potential of a muscle, but which strength are we talking about in a list of 10 general physical skills? And does that matter? And is there something to be said for pointing out that this strength we're referencing here is contractile potential? And like, so there's these weird little nuancy things that as I look at these lectures, you can we can talk about it, but they're still just like freaking bomb proof. It's so fun to be as removed from it where like, if this was all wrong, like it wouldn't crush my soul. Like I by any means, like if we were dead wrong with all this, like I still know how to make people really, really healthy. And I still understand this space really, really well, but I have yet to find something that has remotely the depth. And something I'm realizing even more is like these intangibles that a community brings, like the intangibles of like going to a gym, having a routine, meeting with a coach, having other people, all looking to pursue different parts of their system. Like those things are not explicitly stated in a lot of the stuff that we do, but those things are insanely important to this overall process. Like I've tried to train at home and solo and all these things for freaking years. And it's pathetic compared to the time that I spend in facilities. And I recently just started going to Coast Range CrossFit because like since I left NorCal, I haven't really had a home. Like I've dropped into gyms and I've done things like that, but it just never felt right. It didn't feel like it fit. And I found a home. Like I went to Coast Range and I'm like, holy crap, that's Wes Pyatt's gym. And it's like, I walked in and was like immediately, I was like, this is where I need to be. And I'm waking up. I just went and worked out at 5:30 in the morning. What's wrong with me? Like I got up at 4:45 and I'm like, yeah, let's go work out.
Let's get after it.
It was for assault bike sprints. It was for 30 cal assault bike, 5:30 cal assault bike sprints is what I went for. Like,
oh gosh, devastation nation.
But there's just so much that's an intangible that we can't really put our fingers on that is so important about these spaces that are created. So like, I'm still so invested in everything that we do here. And it's been really interesting to watch the leaving it, coming back, going in these spaces, competing at a high level, having it be my whole life, having it be a part of my life, helping affiliates, looking at the differences in affiliates. Like trying to develop coaches, still teaching level ones, looking at the different moods, watching CrossFit fluctuate as a global company and seeing what they do. It's like, it's fascinating. I mean, you guys are self-described CrossFit nerds, and I'm sure you get a similar kick out of just watching all this. And I've like lived it for the last 20 years, and and it's cool. Like I love where I'm at right now. Like I hate the fitness industry more than I've ever hated it. But I love what we're doing. Like I almost walk away from this stuff entirely simply because I hate how much what the fitness industry stands for. But the entire reason Greg originally started CrossFit, like one of his original mission statements was to undermine the fitness industry as it stood, to create a set of gyms that basically, and this is not something we state often anymore, to create a set of gyms that made it so people actually attended rather than just selling memberships for $10 a month that nobody used. That was the model. That was the standard model. We want you to not come in. We want you to pay your membership and never come in. Like, that is a bullshit industry. And that was what we flipped on its head. And so far we have. Like, we've definitely flipped that on its head. Yes. Now my next goal is to destroy the pursuit of aesthetics. I think there is no good that comes from pursuing looking a certain way. And I think there is no good from promoting it other than maybe the initial inspiration of somebody to like get off their ass. That's it. Beyond that, it's just self-centered wanking, and I cannot stand it. And anyway, that's a whole nother diatribe we can go on. But
I mean, I'll speak for Kevin when I say that. Like, I have a feeling, I think I know where you're going when you make that statement, but I'll put it out there right now that we'd love to have you back on to go down that rabbit hole.
Sure.
And
I want to go down it with two intelligent people because. So you guys,
I say so. Sam and someone else. Then Sam and one other person.
Kev, you're speaking to a college dropout / music theater major. So I think you and I are in the same boat. We're good to go.
All good. Sam's got all the smarts for us. It's good to go.
Kev, I'm pretty sure the only one who graduated college here is you. So. Yeah, right.
And it was to pursue a profession that I didn't really need it. And so
sounds like college.
I'm also the only one with crippling amounts of student debt. So you win some, you lose some.
True story.
At least you got that student debt from it, man.
Okay, so we typically try to keep these to about an hour. We don't need to go crazy longer than that.
Okay, well, I'll plant the seed then. I want to talk to you guys next time.
Okay.
Think hard. Is there any value? Is there any value to the pursuit of aesthetics?
Over capacity.
No, period.
Or in general.
Not even
period.
In general. So like
as a pursuit.
As a pursuit, as a highlighted pursuit, is there value to the pursuit of aesthetics? And I've come to terms that there are some little things, but like I want to flush this discussion out because it's like every day.
Say we gotta save it we gotta save it.
I know. I go on social media.
Gotta leave off each episode on a question.
I'm writing
teaser for the
right
tens
now.
of people that will listen to this.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll
Our
get
tens
more
of listeners.
Because I enjoy this conversation. This is good.
Very cool. All right, so Kev, any final burning desires in terms of questions or things you want to throw out into the ether?
Not for this topic. I think we nailed it. Had a good conversation, and hopefully stimulated thought to anyone listening. So
absolutely,
I think I'm good.
Very cool. I will just say it's funny you mentioned Wes Pyatt. Like one of the gnarliest workout demos I ever watched from a .com workout was you and Wes doing this god awful EMOM thruster thing.
Oh yeah,
I think it was.
I remember that video.
It was like
that was right. That was in front of my house, my old house, and I got texted like a couple hours before. I had been not training for like 6 months, and they're like, "Hey, Wes," like Matt, one of our old buddies, he's like, "Hey, can Wes come over and you guys film a .com workout demo for me?"
Yeah.
And I was like, "Sure, what is it?" And he sent it to me, and I was like, "Oh my god!" Like, I was like, "This is gonna be so bad." I'm like, "Okay, if I die, like what's?" and he's like, "Yeah, sure." And Wes just destroyed me in it, and I was sore for a month after that. That was so bad.
Yeah,
that was great. I'm glad you remember that one. Definitely.
I'm gonna for those our listeners who have not seen this workout, have not done this workout, I'm going to find the video. I'm going to put it in the show notes. Please give it a watch.
Please
and then
go
wonder,
watch it. It's incredible.
Yeah. And then ask yourself, how hard would you be willing to go in that workout? Pat,
None. Zero.
Thank you so much for doing this. We really appreciate it, and we're very, very excited to be able to continue conversations with you.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been awesome.
And we'll definitely do this again. And to anyone who's listening, thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.
Sounds good.